Hi, this is Phil, and I'm here to make sure you know all about the Capes and Lunatics Patreon. Don't miss out on all new episodes of Wade's World, Boob Windows and Long Boxes, our Hard R movie reviews, and so much more, all completely uncensored. Access starts for as little as $1 a month, full videos when you pledge $3 a month. Check us out at the link in all of our show notes, or just go straight to patreon.com/capesandlunatics. Hope to see you there.
Me hearties, and welcome once again to Full Stream Ahead. I'm your host, Charlie, the Professor Esser, and with me as always is my skinny rich friend.
It's Mozz.
Hey Mozz, welcome back to Season 1, Episode 1 of Loki, Glorious Purpose. Loki, the god of mischief, finds himself out of time and in an unusual place, and forced against his godly disposition to cooperate with others. Our director this week is Kate Herron, and Michael Waldron gets both our created by and our writerly credit this week.
I think it's interesting the way they phrase that description. The first three words, I think, define what this episode is kind of all about. Loki finds himself.
Yeah, well, it is about Loki coming to terms in many ways with, and it's sort of, I've heard it described as this is sort of they condensed Loki's entire arc into one episode. So that basically we're getting Loki at the end of this episode is arguably, and big emphasis on arguably, the Loki we saw give the noble sacrifice in Infinity War.
I think it's not.
No, it's not at all.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's not at all. But that's because essentially, although that's sort of there's layers to it, and one layer is that Loki and this Loki were always the same Loki, but that there were these things, and, that he had to come through. And, not for nothing, the forgiveness of Odin at the end of Odin's life, after Odin had been kind of an abusive father figure for many centuries, arguably, it's like, should we really like that he calls him his son? Is that coming from a healthy place that was moving to Loki? Or was it just that no, he's been dealing with this for a long time, and that's all he wanted was his father's approval? And I guess maybe that's just the way Norse gods are. I mean, that's the way they raise their kids. I
think that's one symptom of Loki's, what makes Loki tick, so to speak. That's one symptom of it, not like the defining characteristic of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but anyway, so let's get back to the story. This, and people have pointed out that it is actually different cuts and different clips than we've seen in Endgame. That actually, what we see here is slightly different, immediately suggesting that these timelines are still in flux. Although there is an argument to be made, and this is something that I believe it was in Millar's run on Fantastic Four where they came up with this idea, because always it used to be, if you go back in time, you can't, as soon as you go back in time, that creates an alternate timeline. And what Millar said was, well, no, you could create a same timeline, so long as you don't change anything too radically while you're back there. That once you go back and you change something bad happens, and that's when things get out of whack.
That's what you see on their meters. It's about to read, the timeline is about to reach the red line, which means it needs to bifurcate, and they're trying to stop those bifurcations from happening.
Exactly. Although there's a secondary aspect of that that's kind of interesting, is if you look at those timeline arcs, you can see that they can curve, and then they sort of level off a bit, and I wonder if they curve back. And that becomes this idea that something breaks apart, but never reaches that. And it's the level 5. 5 is the area that's when you split it off. But that if it goes out and comes back, and it's parallel, but then it'll basically the gravity of the prime timeline, the sacred timeline,
right?
Pull it back in.
I think the mechanism or the gravity that they're talking about is probably more that the war between the realms that they were talking about. If there's too many of these timelines, they're going to fight with each other. It's just their natural inclination. So to stop that cataclysmic war from happening, they're going to limit the amount of timelines to just one.
Well, and it's an assumption that it's just one. Because there may be others that are now essentially established parallel timelines. But you don't have to go into all the details. And then here was the thing I was thinking about. So, as we know, in a lot of the talk in this thing, there is all this talk about Kang the Conqueror.
Mm.
And when you start talking about a multiversal war among the timelines, the idea of Kang the Conquerors deciding to, after having conquered all the time, deciding to now conquer all the other timelines kind of makes some sense. So that in that way, you could argue that the reason why Kang wants to keep the sacred timeline sacred is because that's his power base. That's his home timeline. So long as he can keep that timeline at least secure, there's always going to be branches. There's always going to be things that come out of it because you can't help it. But you're not going to be able, but that, as long as he keeps that solid, then he has his base in time that he can attack other timelines and because theoretically every time he goes back in time, that creates another, because it's weird, like he goes back in time and he conquers people. But then that creates an alternate timeline where he is now the emperor of that timeline. But of course what you could arguably have then is he does that, he creates these multiple timelines, and then all those timelines fight in the future to see who is the king that's going to unify all the timelines.
Imagine if you're so egotistical that you figure, hey, I want to see if I could beat myself from 1985. And he goes back and tries to best himself.
Just I think Ken does stuff like that.
That'd be awesome. That sounds like a great idea. I would love to.
He has manipulated his own timeline to see what would happen. Like if he made himself a young Kang, and that's where you get Iron Lad, who was one of the runaways, which is Kang going back, instead of going back to ancient Egypt, he goes back to like the early 2000s or the late 90s. And when he's a teenager and hangs out with a bunch of superpowered kids. Yeah, there's lots of stories for Kang. But, there's a lot that's very interesting that goes on in this, obviously. But it starts off with Loki escaping. And he goes to Mongolia, and it's in its own way kind of a little disappointing in a way. Because he stands up on what amounts to a little hill of sand, and says, I am Loki of Asgard, and I am burdened with glorious purpose. And he's given this speech to these 4 people there that don't speak his language.
Right. And you would imagine Loki would be able to speak anybody's language. He's a god who's lived and messes with people for a pastime.
You would imagine he could, and for whatever reason, when he went to Germany, no one seemed to be bothered by him speaking English. Although it is said that everyone in Germany speaks English. So, and I've been to Germany, and a lot of people speak English in Germany. It's a very popular language. They got conquered by us in England once, and we've always been right there. So, and English was a very popular language, and if nothing else, Germans are what happened to say? 1940? I don't know what happened in 1940, but let's talk about something else. Let's talk about the World Cup. Yes. Go football. But he's there, and then of course we get are TVA agents coming in because this is a rogue timeline.
Would they be called timekeepers? They're called timekeepers.
The timekeepers, yes. Well, these are the hunters, I believe they're called.
Right.
Because they have different levels of the hunters. Then they have the.
Oh no, the original the three beings they're actually called.
They're the timekeepers.
Right.
Those are the timekeepers.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually, of course, I closed my IMDb, so now I don't know what anything is called anymore. But we get back to that anyway.
So yeah, and then the head hunter who has that special baton slays Loki. But it's funny to me in that moment that thing doesn't have very much range. So the only way that baton could have worked is if Loki came right at her. So he had a moment there where he could have transported himself away, flew away, turned himself into, whatever, and ran away. But no, it's just like he came right at, and then that's when it's over. You're caught.
Yeah. Well, and it's because he underestimates them. And that is always the problem when you are an immortal god. And this is, Hunter B-15. That's Wunmi Mosaku. She played, I believe, Ruby on Lovecraft Country. She is awesome as an actress, and I hope she's going to be in a lot of this stuff.
Looks that way.
Yes. And, but that's the thing. And it's one of these things you see that she actually, they must have, I'm guessing they have some kind of mega strength because she does later in fighting with Loki, best him physically.
Right, but he's just a flesh being in that realm. Yeah,
but he's an Asgardian god.
No, not in that realm. His magic doesn't work. Nothing works there. He's just a flesh being.
I mean, is that how that is it? That's an interesting question because someone pointed out that if their magic doesn't work here, why isn't he blue?
Oh, that's an interesting point.
Yes.
What if this is all some sort of projection in someone's mind?
I mean, it's possible. A lot of things are possible. My own theory is that actually Loki, that it was never someone's magic that made him change colors. It was that he was just a natural shapeshifter.
Oh.
And so that's just his nature. Because we do see a Skrull in this. It's a Skrull who looks like a Skrull, but we might imagine that Skrull can still shapeshift because that's just a physical trait of the Skrulls. There's no magic involved. So, which really means that when you're trying to get away, turn into a bird. We do see in this that Loki's gender is listed as fluid, which gets a lot of speculation because there is talk, because there is a female actress who isn't in this episode. I don't believe it's Mara something or Maria, and people thought, maybe she's going to be Lady Loki. But actually, there are other people in this that also don't have titles given to them. And there's one really old guy. And I'm thinking, actually, the villain... So anyway, yes, and the plot line is... Spoilers for this episode. The plot line is the TVA needs Loki to help them track down another Loki that is far more dangerous than this Loki, which is also probably a little disappointing to Loki. There's a Loki... More Loki than him.
Right. So what does that mean to be Loki? Does he really understand that? I think he gets close to it by the end of this episode, but that's an interesting question. Is it even worth asking that question? Who do you really want to be? Do you really want to be that? Are you upset that Loki is more Loki than you thought you were?
Or more dangerous, anyway.
Right. No, but is that the essence of you? Do you enjoy being dangerous? That's the question. Mobius asks him, and that's the point he's trying to get to. It's like, you think she's more Loki than you, but what does that mean to you? What do you want to be? And it's like, oh man, I don't enjoy the killing, but it's like, oh, okay, you're finally getting it, and that's,
and that is the point, is that he does say, do you enjoy killing? And there's that nice little parallel because Loki, of course, understands the pageantry of the TVA. That these are people trying to intimidate us. They're using this scary thing because, they're weak, but they want us to fear them. And he understands the pantomime because he is the god of lies, after all. So he knows when he's being lied to. And he knows that everything they're telling him, to some extent or another, is at least partially a lie.
Right.
And But the fact of the matter is, as to use my favorite quote from Vietnam, that's as true as it is irrelevant. That everything they're telling him is a lie is true, but is also irrelevant to the situation at hand. And the situation at hand is Loki is having to deal with the fact that, one, they are more powerful than him. They have a drawer full of Infinity Stones. And we got to talk a little about the humor in this because, you didn't like that?
I don't know how to feel about it yet, because are they trying to tell me that, they're more powerful than Thanos, and they're trying to come out with the Eternals? Are they trying to tell me that everything's more here? That it doesn't really matter. It's insignificant. Like, I shouldn't care about the Eternals.
So here's how Infinity Stones work, generally speaking.
No, I understand the mechanism, but just to tell me all of a sudden all of that is not the most powerful, there's not that gravity attached to everything. It was all just like, ants on a hill. It's a little too for me to try to give me that perspective, I think. Ease me into that. That's a little
okay. Well, and again, in this moment, it's about conveying the situation that Loki is in.
Sure.
And in this moment, and for what it's worth, when Mobius comes to him at the end, and he says, "Have you tried this?" He says, "Yes," several times. So even though he's been told this and he knows it, he doesn't buy it. And the fact of the matter is, it's like, and it's really just a situation that, and this is the idea with Infinity Stones, is that within their own universe, they are all powerful. But once you leave, because essentially Infinity Stones are the essence of the universe in which they exist.
Right.
But if they're outside of that continuity of that universe, then they're just an empty vessel. That essentially the power is in the universe, and the stone lets you tap into the power in the universe. But once it's outside of the universe, now it's just a pretty rock.
Right, so it's not necessarily that the Time Variance Authority is more powerful than anyone else. It's just that they exist in a space where everything is null and void, in a sense.
Exactly, yeah. So they exist in a space they exist in a place that's outside of time and space. And which is why they say time flows different here.
All right, yeah, I can dig that.
They're, so within it, it's like they exist in a bubble, probably at the end of all things, or possibly before all things, which is the other place you can sit, or just somewhere just outside of the timeline where they can operate and observe, because you have to be above to observe. And within that, they probably have some kind of localized time, maybe time loops around. Who knows exactly what it does, or what that mechanism really looks like. But that's the cosmology of it. That's for much deeper nerd dives than we have. I do want to, we get this scene which is actually one of the first scenes we see that's Mobius's first scene, is Mobius in, I forget, I was thinking it was 1590s France.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we see all the Minutemen are dead.
What I find interesting in that moment is he says, do you think it was him? Right?
Yes.
Pointing to the culture being him. Now, if we're going to say it's going to be Lady Loki, I have to also make the assumption that Mobius probably doesn't know what's going on, really. And that's a hard leap for me to make. I think Mobius knows what's going on.
No.
He's got irons in the fire. He's managing the situation. Doesn't seem terribly worried. He's a little perturbed, but he doesn't seem terribly worried. So, that's why I don't think it's Lady Loki. Right.
I think the villain is Old Man Loki, the Loki
that makes more sense to me.
Who did eventually come to rule all of Asgard and rule the 9 realms. The older Loki who had his throne ripped away by these people who said, "You're a variant," and he's like, "I've already conquered this universe. I am not the variant. You are."
Do you think we'll get Hiddleston in old makeup, or do we get a different actor playing him?
I think we're going to get a different. I mean, the problem is that I think old man makeup. It's bad. I mean, they did it for Cap, but they did it for Cap to sit on a bench.
Right, for 5 seconds.
Yeah, I think it's better to get an older actor.
I agree. I would like to see somebody. Hiddleston. Yeah. And it feeds into the shapeshifter, especially if we will get a Lady Loki. Or, as I'd originally thought, maybe Morgan Le Fay, who is also a time traveler.
And I could absolutely see Loki say at some point, well, I'm going to be honest with you. I can help you, but I'm going to need to put a team together. And I know someone who can handle time travel. My gal Morgan over in the court of King Arthur. If we can just dodge Merlin for a few minutes, we can take care of it. You know? And that I think would be awesome. You introduce Morgan Le Fay, you introduce sort of Loki's time variant Suicide Squad.
I like it.
Yeah, you know, maybe even get old Thor in there since they're going after old Loki. Maybe time variant old Thor that they got locked up somewhere.
Yeah, I can see Loki going back in time and trying to prevent the many times I'm sure Thor must have bullied his little brother. And try to turn the tables in some of those key moments.
Well, you know, you never know how they're going to work that. Although one of the things I loved is the D.B. Cooper bit. Mm-hmm. You know, where it is, you know, and again, just this idea that he lost a bet to Thor.
What do you think that bet was? What's
interesting is that the bet was obviously, like, that was the punishment for the bet.
Right, that's what I'm saying. What was the punishment? Was the punishment to rob a bank? What was the punishment?
Well, yeah, it was like, give me 250,000 Earth American dollars.
Yeah, but I don't think there's got to be more than that because they're not concerned with the issues of men. You know, dollars don't mean anything.
No. But it would be something that would be an annoying thing to have to get and stay out of Odin's. Right, because they're not supposed to be going.
That's what I'm saying. I wonder what like the rules surrounding that bet was, or what that punishment more specifically were, because that sounds interesting.
And maybe we're going to get that. Maybe we're going to get back to that because it would be great to find out what the bet was.
Yeah,
I mean, honestly, it would be great to get Chris Hemsworth in this. You know, I mean, I would love that if we really do. And for what it's worth, I mean, Chris Hemsworth is such a delightful teddy bear about all these things. He's like, that sounds like fun. Oh,
they already got. I mean, like that scene of Cap going. What's the line? Taking the elevator, going down the stairs. Right. That line is different than the one we saw before. So either, I mean, more than likely, it's an old take. I was thinking maybe they got him back to film that specific scene, which would imply that they maybe have the capacity to, you know.
Oh yeah, I mean they can, and of course that's the other conversation is that there is a woman in the background of one scene that kind of looks like Peggy Carter.
Right. Now, I didn't catch that, but I saw it pointed out. What did you think?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I haven't seen anyone say that Hallie Atwell's in the credits. I haven't seen, but then again, I think that if, you know, variants such X1, you know, if they had listed all of the extras in the credits, someone would have said, no, that's credited to, you know, Stephanie Smith of Tallulah, Montana or something. You know, so that we don't have an answer to who that actress is in the background intrigues me. And it was an interesting thought I was thinking about because, you know, the idea of the TVA trying to stop these variants, the fact of the matter is, if they try to stop the variants, they're likely, if they try to stop Cap and Peggy Carter, they may find themselves kind of outmatched. As you pointed out, those are close-range weapons.
Right.
And if Cap and Peggy basically move faster than them, disarm them, do this and that and the other. And, you know, for what it's worth, maybe that's the actual way they're going to square the circle of Endgame, is that they do capture Peggy, Cap goes after her, but in order for him to let her go to live her life, you know, they basically say, okay, look, here's what we're going to do. We'll let you live in a pocket dimension parallel to this, and you can have a life with Peggy, but then at the end, you just drop back into your old universe.
Right.
You know, because you really damaged the timeline. You know, and that may be how they square that circle. You know, but I would love to see just this idea of, I mean, I love it, at least in my fan fiction, the idea that the TVA kept on sending wave after wave of people to beat Cap and Peggy, and they just constantly, you know, ninjaing it 6 ways to Sunday.
That's funny.
And then of course, who knows if we're going to get back to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because we do have Phil Coulson in this.
Yes.
And they don't say, they say, and actually it's kind of one of these interesting things because Loki says Phil Coulson dies. Mobius doesn't say that Phil Coulson dies.
He's only showing him his memories. That's it.
Exactly. Well,
not reality.
His timeline.
Exactly. Right. He's only showing him like his observation from that perspective of him. Right. He's not showing him the real timeline or whatever. He's just showing him his observation of the time.
And it's one of these things, and for what it's worth, it's the first time we've gotten Phil again, so that's nice. We're always happy to see Phil.
Indeed.
But it has this interesting quality of it, because obviously it could very easily be that, no, he died, and then the other Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is an alternate timeline. Possibility. I'm not going to fight it if that's where they want to go. And who knows, maybe they even have something where something happens when they're fighting, and then all of a sudden it's like, he's still alive, we can save him, put him in Tahiti, and it's like this whole other, and that's a branching timeline. You created a whole other timeline, we can't even stop it now, it got past 5 before we could get to it. Which is the interesting question, what happens if a timeline goes past 5? If a timeline goes past 5, can they get it back? Can they just prune it, or is it too late? And now it's an alternate universe.
I bet you they just say get rid of it, exterminate it, right? They have those things that may or maybe like the thing is if they go
5, maybe by the time it gets to 5, there's a new time variance authority. That's their sacred timeline.
Oh, wait a second. You saying there could be multiple time variance authorities?
Theoretically,
or do they exist at the Nexus?
I mean, I don't know. Like I said, it could be at the end of time. It could be at the start of time. Makes more sense, actually, if you're going to be the time variance, you want to be at the start of time than to be at the end of time, because obviously at the end of time, there's all these other universes already there.
But think about it this, like the time keepers who created the time variance authority only came into being
at the end of time.
Well, I guess, it would be the end of time, right?
They came into being. Well, in the comic books, at the end of time, they come into being. And then they sort of,
and then...
Yeah, but then there were also variants on them in the comic books, because they first appear as the Time Twisters, who were supposed to be the Time Keepers, but instead they just went back and just caused more chaos in the timelines. So, exactly what we're going to get in this, I mean, it is anybody's game. We'll know tomorrow, because we're recording on Tuesday tonight, and so the next episode drops tomorrow. We'll know tomorrow at least a little more. But for right now, what we're given is that there is a very evil Loki who burns people alive, that is out there, who is apparently plotting something, because we see that he keeps on stealing the little trimmer charges. He's making a time bomb, if you will.
Or having a utility belt of do-overs.
That's possibly too, Exactly what they build out of this, it's going to be interesting. There's no doubt about that.
He could probably take them, and if he has the technology to turn that bomb into tiny little bullets, right? And then any little moment, he can just throw them down like those little popping pop rock whatever thingies, and then poof, you're back 2 hours ago. I'm gonna shuck right this time.
Yes. Well, since we don't know how the technology works, why not? Why not have that be the way it works? That would work great.
I would definitely give it a shot.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many possible ways this could play out. I'm still hoping for Morgan Le Fay. Fingers crossed. I'm hoping for old Loki, too. And I really want that old wizard Loki who looks at his younger self so freaking naive. It's like, do you know how many cycles of Ragnarok I've lived through at this point, son? There is we are who we are. And you know what? We chose to be evil because we do enjoy hurting people. Because making people suffer is the only way you can control them and have power. Although it's interesting because arguably Loki, when he says why he wants to rule, because people are unhappy making choices. But if you think about it, that's essentially what the timekeepers do. They say you don't get to make a choice because the sacred timeline must be preserved. You can't be late for work today because unless you were supposed to be late for work.
And if you're late for work, that means you were supposed to be late for work.
Exactly. Man, I was going to be here on time, but then these freaking guys with armor and these time sticks, they stopped me, they smashed my car, they said, you're late today, buddy.
You can't know the truth. Hey, if that's the case, you can't blame me for being late. I was always supposed to be late. Hey, if I'd have showed up early, Butterfly Effect could have set something off. There could have been a bomb in China or something, you know?
Exactly, you know. So you're welcome, boss.
Exactly.
You're welcome. Anyway, I do want to talk about Casey because Casey is probably my favorite character so far.
Who's Casey? Oh,
the desk clerk,
the guy with the Infinity Stones in his desk.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he's the receptionist. He's doing his job. He's lived there his whole life. Doesn't know what a fish is.
Oh man, that's great.
Yeah,
I just want to know what I'm being threatened with before I comply.
You know, but what I love about that is just actually my favorite scene about that is when he complains to HR.
Okay.
Because you see him coming, and there's the two judges with the sashes. I mean, she came in, not a word. She just prunes my cart. You know, it's like almost pruned me. So that is that is unprofessional behavior.
Man.
Now I have to suffer because these people can't keep track of their variants.
Yeah.
You know. And the poor guy that gets pruned in the waiting room because he refuses to take a ticket.
Yeah, he looked like he had it coming.
And they made him as unlikable as the character in the few minutes he existed.
Right. Like, he seemed pretty clueless, or was he? Like, who was he? He was obviously, he's not like a incidental sort of character.
Oh, we're going to see him again.
Because he was messing with the time stream. Who is he that he had the power to be messing with the time stream?
He's a guy who built the time machine. If you think about it, that's sort of the thing. Is like Tony Stark built the time machine, but the fact of the matter is, once it's a thing that could exist, probably lots of people build it all the time. It's if you ever watch Rick and Morty, when he gives his past self. Goes to another version and says, yeah, you know what you find out when you invent teleportation? You're the last guy to invent teleportation. Likewise, when you invent a time machine, you know what you find out? You're the last guy to invent a time machine. And that's sort of weird. Although when it's new to you, it's still new to you, and that's its own adventure.
Well, so all you got to do is wait for the next guy to invent the time machine. Then you're a step ahead of that guy.
And then you get to be the other Rick.
Right. It's a cyclical.
Which actually is one of the things I wanted to mention about the variant Loki.
Uh-huh.
And this idea of the Rickest Rick from Rick and Morty. And this idea that, Rick, 8712, whatever his number designation is, which actually isn't even his designation, but it's a whole long story if you get into the lore of Rick and Morty, which does not make sense, but that's okay. It's not supposed to. When, he has this thing where it's important to him to be the Rickest Rick, and so he has to be the true chaotic Rick. But in being the true chaotic Rick, he actually becomes very ordered and structured in his way of doing. It's like it's you can never be the most evil, the most tricksterish, the most anything, because then you're just trying too hard. And I get that sort of the idea here is that this most evil Loki will get undone by our protagonist Loki, expressly because he is the Loki who is going to be able to see that this is a Loki bound in pattern. And if you're bound in pattern, you can't truly innovate.
Right.
And that's
you're just trying to match wits with a hypothetical version of yourself, like a caricature of yourself. You're becoming a character, and then you're bound to the impulses of that character, not necessarily to your own.
And we've had instances in the comic books where young Loki meets old Loki and basically says that to him. I was like, no, I'm not you. You are some Loki I might have become in an alternate future, sure, but that's not me now because I'm not going to be you because you're lame.
Right, I could still save myself.
Exactly. In fact, coming back in time to tell me this is my future kind of defeats your own purpose, you know. Other than that, I think there was a whole thing where
you have unwittingly
Loki
become the ghost of Christmas past.
Exactly. Or Christmas future.
Right.
Whichever. You're one of the ghosts in the Christmas thing. Yeah. By the way, I know it wasn't John Tron playing the hedge fund guy, but he reminded. If you've ever seen, he actually is very funny, but it's that same kind of over the top, super privileged guy kind of character. Although, yeah, and it just reminded me a lot of him. So, shout out to John Tron if you're watching the YouTubes. Yes, you remember the guy who gets, the guy in Loki who gets pruned, the guy in the waiting room. Because I didn't need to take a ticket, and then he kind of reminded me of John Tron. Yes, but except that guy has long hair and John Tron doesn't have long hair. But anyway, yeah.
I also want to point out how good Owen Wilson was. Because the whole time you're first thinking, is the Time Variance Authority someone that's good or are they evil? Most evil bad guys think they're doing good. And I think the Time Variance Authority thinks they're doing good. But I was like, I'm interested. And the metaphor to who they are as a Time Variance Authority is what do I think of Mobius? Is he a good person or is he a bad person? And that moment where he's talking to that kid, not necessarily when he wins the kid over, but as he's about to shut the timeline down, the look in his eyes, the lament and the regret of the situation, and he feels the quiet and the solitude of a world that's about to not be anymore, and that is there on his face, and he has a real heavy reaction to it. And in that moment, I'm like, okay, I think this guy thinks he's doing the right thing, and I think he's a good guy. I believe in that moment, I was sold on him then. I thought it was a really, really great moment. I thought he played it so superbly.
Well, it's an interesting question about when they shunt a timeline like that. What exactly gets pruned? Because if you think about it, that girl goes back out there, or that kid, I don't know if it was a boy or a girl, but anyway, that kid goes back out there. And maybe the blue disappears from their teeth, but they continue on.
Right.
And maybe they have some.
Gone or
I don't. That's always that thing, because, they talk about the nightmare department in this too.
Ooh.
And someone proposed, our nightmares the memories we have of lives that were
you erase
pruned.
it from their conscious memory, but perhaps it's harder to erase it from their subconscious memory.
Exactly.
That peeks through when they're dreaming. Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, there's all sorts of possibilities for that. And, maybe we will get Nightmare before the end of it. Maybe we'll get to that Nightmare department, because the writer of this is also the writer of the Multiverse of Madness. So, we're going to be watching for those clues, watching for those hints, watching for those Wanda references, But then again, maybe Wanda could avoid their view too. That's sort of that thing, if Wanda is the threat that they couldn't see.
Right.
But yeah, Owen Wilson is just fantastic.
Yeah.
And he's great as a person trying to, honestly, after this, I want to see so much more Owen Wilson playing grizzled cops. He's just because you can, his interrogation of Loki, it's just so perfect. It gives nothing. And at the whole time, although he's not in control because Loki picks his pocket and all that kind of stuff, which shows you that Loki still has mad skills. It's not all magic.
It's such a great moment, because there's that moment where he's on the floor and Mobius offers him his hand to get up. And that was an important moment for me. I was like, okay, this is either where he wins him over or he doesn't. Does he give in to his help to say, it's a big step to say, okay, I'll let you help me up, rather than somebody who's defiant would be like, no, I don't know, I'm going to get up on my own. But to me, that was an important moment to see how he would react. And the fact that he let him help him up, I was like, that doesn't sit well with me. He would be more defiant. He wouldn't get, and then when I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what he was doing. Really, really nice.
But it's also nice to know that, Loki can do close-up magic.
Yeah.
Loki can do that card trick.
Right. And that's why he gave his hand, because he was just picking his pocket. That's why he did it. So it's like, okay, now it makes more sense. I can, that in the what I think the character would do made sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, there's just a lot going on here. It's really fun. No end credits, not a lot of Easter eggs in the background, except unless there's some person who's going to say, well, that equation, because they do a bunch of wave fluctuation equations.
There was the Mind Stone being used as a paperweight somewhere, so that was cool.
Yes. Or was that the Soul Stone? I forget which it was.
It was interesting. Orange or yellow, right? I don't remember if it was orange or yellow.
Yeah, I can't.
I think it was orange, actually.
Yeah, and honestly, the stone colors, even in the show, they vary, because it's like sometimes it's a brighter color and sometimes it's a darker color, you know. Yeah. But anyway, it all played out as it goes, and you know, Loki takes a gig to help. And we're going to have to see if this all blows up in Owen Wilson's face next episode. All right, Mozz. I've enjoyed talking about this episode. I hope you have too. If anyone wants to talk to you directly about what goes on in this episode, how can they find you?
Oh, they can email me at mozzmanzor@gmail.com or find me on Facebook under Mozz Manzor. That's MOZZ MANZOOR.
And, of course, you can always write to me in that old-fashioned email where Mozz and Paz once did at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com. Of course, follow me on the Twitter as I live tweet Legends of Tomorrow, Sunday nights at 8. And maybe Loki, I think it's supposed to be on Wednesday nights at 8, where they do the official live tweet from the Disney Corporation.
Gotcha.
The Disney Corporation has given us the permission that now is the time we should all live tweet. Fine, girl. Which I believe is.
I mean, you're welcome to do it at 3 a.m. in the morning, but I mean,
yeah, that too, man. You know, but it's sort of fish for you say. At Chaliesa.
They should just release it at a normal human hour.
Well, no, because they do it at midnight, because then it's the time of the day. They do it on the West Coast. The West Coast doesn't feel slighted.
Yeah, but now I got to stay up extra. That's just silly.
Well, no, you actually get it at a more reasonable hour, because you get it at 3 a.m. So if you go to sleep at
that's
like
more
8
reasonable
PM,
than midnight?
it depends if you want to get up to watch it, or if you want to
Who's
watch
getting
it
up at 3 a.m.?
Who's staying up till midnight?
Well, I think that's a much more reasonable ask than waking up at 3 a.m. Or staying up till 3 a.m.
But then I guess all the Disney people are on the West Coast. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, then do it like at 8 p.m. for them, 11 p.m. for us. I'm with that. Do it at a reasonable hour so we can actually watch it. We don't have to wake up
8 p.m.
and be
Eastern.
like, working and going, oh, man, I want to watch that episode.
They should do it 8 p.m. Eastern.
Yes.
On the East Coast, and then it would be 5 p.m. Eastern on the West Coast.
That works. See, that makes more sense. That makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
You get so much more viewership. It's just silly to do it at 3.
Well, no, because they get the same amount of viewership. It's just if you want to have that engagement. That's the idea of the engagement. Because they can drop it whenever they want, and it doesn't matter.
Right. But there'd be more people watching together at that time.
Yeah, arguably. Anyway, okay. So, if you'd like to talk to me about that, or actually, do the emails, do that. But you know what? Also, by the way, just want to say, go to linktree.com/Capes and Lunatics. That'll give you a link to all of the Capes and Lunatics feeds and stuff and merch, so you can buy stuff. That's cool. And go to southgatemediagroup.com. And I believe there is a Linktree, linktr.ee/Southgate, which will probably get you to all the Southgate stuff. But anyway, regardless, just to give some pitches out there for other stuff. If you'd like to follow me on the Twitters, it is at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEssser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle.
For quality. Bing!
Thank you, Mozz. All right, yes, scurvy land-loving dogs. You have made it to the end of another episode of Full Stream Ahead, and we will see you again next week. I hope you pack your seasickness pills and come again, as we once again sail full stream ahead. Arr.